Hi there, and welcome to March. The next step in our journey is to bring up half the machine. That's my plan. That whole login day thing seems to keep getting pushed further and further out, and we're past that 20-year mark, but hopefully coming soon. Maybe. So, bring up half the machine, and I knew that this was going to be a pain in the arse. I knew it, and so I got to be honest, I have procrastinated and pushed it out and pushed it out. And my conscience will allow me to delay no longer. So, here we are today. I had a couple of things work in my favor recently, so kind of motivated. The first was the domain keys. So, like the 6800, you have a platform, which is the entire E10K, and then you can have up to 16 domains where you slice the machine up into sub-chunks of system boards, devices, things like that. And the existing domain on here, the one that I've been using, star 50, has 3 system boards. 3? Yeah. 0, 1, and 2. So, that's not going to help me very much. It means I had to create a new domain. Domains are tied to a key, or in this case it's an EPROM image. And so there is the authenticated chunk where it verifies and validates it's a good key, and then it contains information like the serial number of the system and the host ID, so the MAC address, things like that. Anybody who's on the Sun knows the NVRAM goes tits up when you lose all that information. In this case, there is no NVRAM, it's actually transferred off the SSP across in the boot process, which is like a serious bonus. But it means you have to have a valid key to fire a domain up. And so that meant that I had to get a new domain key, and Sun does not hand these keys out anymore. They haven't in a very long time, and Sun, hell, isn't even Sun anymore. Sure, can you imagine calling an Oracle hardware guy and asking if they can create a domain key for an E10000? Anyway, a clever chap, an Estonian guy, came up with a way to use the GNU debugger to jump ahead in the key generation, and so you could fake its checking of the key validity and have it generate the key. So when you create the key, you have the host ID, the MAC address, and then a key itself, which is like, you know, the serial number on a gift card or something like that, or a Microsoft license ID. It's a fixed ID, but it is validated through some kind of mathematical means. Same thing happens with this. However, it turns out that it's all done in memory, and using the GDB you can just jump ahead and skip past the validation checks, and it'll assume it's fine, you can create keys. That was great. I thought, okay, I got a plan. Didn't actually have GDB on the SSP, which is kind of a problem, but I had an epiphany this week, and I realized that in all of the reading that I had done, it never actually mentioned that there were a system configuration tied to a key. So I went back and looked, and it turns out that you need the key to start the domain up, but how the domain is configured is utterly irrelevant. They're not tied in any way at all. So I can use any of the existing keys on this system to create a new domain. I even went hunting, and not only do I have the 5 main domains that are already built, star 50 through 54, but this thing, or at least SSP, used to be attached to either different E10Ks, or this was reconfigured in a different way, and I've actually got almost a dozen EPROM keys on this machine for different domains. So, that problem is no longer an issue. That was a big breakthrough, because if the variant of the key generation is just slightly different from the one that the dude who cracked it is used to, then the breakpoints are going to be different, and it's not going to work, which means I'm going to have to go and debug this myself, and I'm not that competent. Anyway, so that problem's solved. I've also been doing a bit more reading in how to modify the domain so that I can add the system boards to it. You cannot add system boards to a domain if they're already configured in another domain. I guess it's kind of logical. That was my phone. I swear, my cross doesn't usually just rattle. So that meant that I have to destroy a domain before I can create a new one with those boards in it. And then a bit more reading, I further discovered that I can just add boards to an existing domain. It's called dynamic reconfiguration. I knew all of this existed because when you have a system board fail, like a CPU cacks out on you, you drain the OS off the system board, shut the system board down, yank it out, replace the processor, slap it back in, bring the system back up. Part of that whole reliability. 6800 is exactly the same way. Of course, 6800 is based off this system, it's just a generation or two along. So, if I delete the domains that are using this half of the system boards, I can then use the dynamic reconfiguration to add the additional system boards to that first domain. So in theory, in fact, I think I can actually edit the config file and drop the system boards straight into the config file. I'll still have to delete it, but actually maybe I can just shuttle the system boards around. Crap, I don't know. Anyway, we will find out. That'll be part of today's expedition. But the fun part is going to be, just like we did in the last video, there's going to be components that are going to be dead, that are going to need to be replaced. I managed to get the bad CPU replaced in this. We tracked it down, replaced it. We did 2 rounds replacing DIMMs, memory DIMMs in here. It's still not fully stacked. There's still slots that are bad. And one bad DIMM takes out the entire bank, which, you know, makes sense, but... So I've got to go through each board individually, find all the file components and replace them. Now before, when I was doing that, I was doing complete bring up. So if you recall from the previous videos, you power the system on physically, then you do a virtual power on, a key switch from the SSP, which powers on all of the components, and then you do a bring up, which configures all of the system, does the system tests, and then actually fires everything up, transfers the boot prom over OBP boots, and then you can connect to it and actually boot the system into Solaris, what have you. You can, however, power the system up and then post it without actually bringing it online, which means that I should be able to test the system individually, shut boards out, replace them, things like that, without having to actually use the dynamic reconfiguration to pull Solaris off the boards, pull the boards out, put the board back in over and over and over again, because that's going to be time consuming. It takes a while to drain Solaris and all of the processes and things like that that are in that RAM space off, and then we add it, bring it all back into the system. So hopefully by repeatedly H-posting it over and over and over and over again, I'll slowly work my way through all of the systems, through all of the components. This does lead to a number of fears that I have. Firstly, monkeying with the SSP. As it is now, it works. Getting a working SSP is problematic. And that's another reason why it sometimes takes a while to get videos organized, because there's always things to do. She who must be obeyed needed something, so it was also why my phone was going nuts. That's what I get for ignoring my phone. Anyway, actually it's not nearly as bad as all that. But, so, things to be afraid of. The SSP, having a working SSP is kind of a big deal. It's often the case with machines like this, like the Cray for example, that getting the front end to it is hard. Getting a front end that has the software installed and is good to go, ready to go, is actually really, really unusual. Because this came from a university and the machine was effectively a gift from Sun to the operating systems development department in the university, there was no qualms about giving me any of this stuff, working or not. It was just not a big deal. And so, you know, it was university property, there was nothing important that was supposed to be on it, and then it had been cleaned by the guy that gave it to me anyway, so having all of the domain keys, the EPROMs, is unusual. I mean, a stroke of luck is an understatement. The other SSPs, I don't even remember if I've gone through yet, that came from the other E10K that I stripped down, but that's probably got EPROMs on it as well. In fact, I am sure it does actually. Anyway, to reconfigure the domains, I have to potentially delete working configured domains, and that makes me nervous. It's almost certainly a non-issue, and I've got the directories backed up. It's very simple file-based stuff, which is really nice, really slick. It's understandable, you know, there's no terrifying registry-based crap where it's one thing linked to another and you mess with this and the entire damn pyramid falls over. Which is probably a bad analogy because pyramids tend to be really stable, but anyway. But my fear is that if I mickey with them and delete them, that I'll screw something up and I won't be able to use them again in the future. That's actually on the lower end, because what I was afraid of is that my initial plan was that I had to delete all of the domains on this side, so *50, which is the one that I'm using that I know works, along with 51 and 50. 51 and 52, so all three domains, and then create a new one with all of these boards. And if I had issues, I might not be able to go backwards and get *50 back. And I think it's a low risk based on my further understanding, and especially with my current plan of killing 51 and 52 and then just migrating boards, adding boards to it. Or if I'm lucky and it's as simple as muddling through a text config file, I might not even have to delete 51 and 52. I can just move the boards around in the text file. That would be nice. The other concern is I will be powering on these system boards over and over and over and over and over again. And that is always bad news bears, man. The SG Onyx 2s, which, you know, I spent months trying to get working, and it was on and off and on and off and on and off as I was learning it, as I was understanding how things worked, and then dealing with the technical issues, finding the bad node boards and popping them out, chasing around which one of the IO6Gs had the bloody keyboard and mouse attached to it that day, all of this garbage. The system components were failing at an accelerating rate because I had to be powering these things on and off. I've said it before, I'll say it again. These are machines that are designed to turn on and stay running for years, for decades. They are designed to not be powered off. And so their inrush current, bang, when you fire that thing up, it just kills components. And it makes me nervous, unsettled at the thought of all of these system boards that I'm going to have to be powering up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. Unfortunately, there's not a whole hell of a lot to be done about it. I have not found a memory tester that I believe will actually work with these DIMMs. And so, you know, I'm not going to buy a $75 used RAM tester from eBay and find that it doesn't work. I just don't have that kind of spare cash to throw around at this kind of crap. He says looking around a room full of computers. Okay, let me check. I'm too cheap to do that. So we'll see what this does. At some point we might come to a teetering point where we say there's just too many side effects. I've got to come at this from a different angle. We'll have to find out. And an anecdote along the same lines. For a while I had a system that I'm not even sure what it specifically came from. It was built into a desk, big old monitor case, and in fact the monitor, the CRT, sat behind like a little slide-up Perspex-y thing. There are a couple big floppy drives on it and a permanently attached keyboard, and the keys were little round press switches like of the style of a teletype, but it was actually a keyboard, and it had a whole bunch of toggle switches on it and roll switches, you know, positioning 0, 1, 2, 3 right through 9 and things like that. Looked kind of like they were serial settings, but I'm pretty sure that this came from like a 1960s or early 70s military installation, and it was the front end 2 or a front one of, or terminal 2, a big system, you know, like a Sage or something like that. And it had been bought by a guy who was a ham from Wichita, and he had gutted it, put a different CRT in it, replaced the floppy drives, and he had built a Z80 system from scratch. Silk screened the boards himself, everything, and it was in a working state when it showed up. Weighed a ton. It was probably 250 pounds at the least. I mean, it was a beast. And it wasn't physically that big, it was just thick and heavy. And it worked. Fired it up, and it would come up. It was obviously missing an OS. There was no, I didn't have any discs with it, but it would bring up into a monitor, you know? And I had a party like a couple nights later, and a bunch of people came around. I'm like, hey, you've got to see this. And people are like, oh, this is great. And they're fiddling with the switches. Never worked again. Because the switches meant something very specific. You know, maybe it jumped to a specific memory location on start or something like that. They were like, I don't know, 40 switches, and, you know, half of them were, you know, roll switches 0 to 9, so that's 10 possibilities for 20 odd switches, and then there are a bunch of toggles with 2 to 4 positions each. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of combinations, and I had lost it, and I had no idea how the system worked because the guy that designed it had passed away, so there was nobody to ask, so it was literally useless. I traded it to the guy who I got the ASR 33 teletype from, because he was into that kind of generation of equipment, and he didn't mind that it was screwed around with and the Z80 was built into it, because mostly he just wanted it because it was a cool looking system that fit with what he collected. But the point is, when you dink with things like this, mostly in reference to messing with the SSP, the screen went to sleep. There's that fear that if you mess with something, you can get it to a point where you cannot go back to a working state. And so, you know, that's kind of what I'm battling. I suspect this is going to be okay. I've got to do it. We need to get half the damn machine running. So, I'm probably going to get myself another cup of coffee and we'll get cracking. Alright, so I'm going to begin by monkeying around with the domain settings, and hopefully I can move some boards around. Also, I changed my mind and got a cup of tea instead of coffee, because I figure if I'm going to be elbow deep in a bunch of system boards, I probably don't need to be all twitchy and jittery. So, this is the current domain status. So we've got star 50 through 54. Platform is E10000, so that is the name of the E10000's platform, which is, you can change that to whatever you want, but this system's already set up like that. You're supposed to select the variant of Solaris that it's running, and if you don't have the correct one, it can cause the system to be unstable or to crash. Now, I installed Solaris 10 on here, and it thinks that it's running 8. Clearly it doesn't seem to make a difference, so it's probably only important for the lower OS numbers like Solaris 2 and so on, versus the later ones like 8, so I'm not going to monkey with that. Here is our list of system boards though. So 0, 1 and 2 is on star 50, and then we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, yada yada yada. Now what I'm going to do is, I think, move system boards 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, which is all of this side of the system, to star 50, and then I'll shunt a couple of boards along so that 51 and 52 have just a board each, because obviously there's some extras on these far ones. Now, up here in the upper console we have a bunch of the configuration files, and if I get this guy here, oop, config, that'll totally work. Shiza. There we go. Okay. So you'll see that these two things look, well, pretty much the same damn thing. And my reading of the dynamic reconfiguration instructions say that when you use DR, the DR commands will modify the domain config file. And they name this one specifically, so I think this is all it keeps track of, which node boards go to which system. Oh, sorry, which system boards go to which domain. So if we're lucky, I can edit this file and shunt these things around. This should update. Hopefully nothing will blow up, and I can just bring the E10K up and the boards will show. So I guess it would be wise to back this guy up first. And then we will edit. And I am not the best Vi person in the universe, but I believe that if we pinned 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're going to remove 3, 4, 5 from here, and 6 and 7 from here, and 9 from here, and so we'll add 8 here and 9 here, and so that should give us star 50 with boards 0 through 7, which is the front side of the machine, or actually the back side of the machine, and then 8, 9, 10, 11, yada yada yada. So we should write, and then we'll jump down here, oopsie, and domain status. Well, that looks suspiciously like it might have worked. Maybe. Alright, so now let's see. What is our host name? Are we currently set up? We are not. Okay, so we'll do a domain switch to star 50. Huh. Alright, fine. That's supposed to exist. Alright, so it occurs to me I can't just switch the domain and start bringing powering the system up because the ETNK is not running. So let's go do that now. I'm not going to bother powering up the disk box because I'm not going to boot the system. I just want to H-post the heck out of these system boards and hopefully find one that works. I do have the hub powered on though because obviously it needs to talk to the SSP. Here goes Charlie. The system is up. I realized that the domain switch, or at least I read further into the manual, is a C shell alias. It's not a script, so I wasn't running C shell, I had bash up. So we've got our system up, we have our front 8 system boards running, and if we do a domain switch to star 50, we're now star 50, and we do a power. Let's see, power on, and that should bring up the appropriate system boards. Looks like we have our first issue. We've got all the system boards powered on but number 7, which says it has a system board out of tolerance. I have no idea what that means, so I'm just going to grab a spare from the stack. traded in boards, and I have marked the other board that it had a system issue with this error, because of course I have so many boards that I'd hate to start muddling good and bad boards up. And so in theory, if we do a power on SB7, that should bring up just this board. Hey, there we go. That looks positive. Now what I didn't think to do was to check if the system board had the same processor modules, because it actually came from the other E10K. So this may come back to bite me, but I'm not climbing back up there. It's a huge pain in the balls. Okay. Let's see if we can H-post the system. Maybe I've done this out of order. Let me see if a bring up will clear it. Whoops. Just something that I was hoping not to do, but we'll see. If I've got things out of sequence because of my unfamiliarity with this. It's time about, you know. Okay, so we can see that it found 12 processors, 3 S-bus cards. So clearly my domain config fiddling hasn't brought the new boards in. There is quite possibly a running configuration file, what it was doing the last time it was up, and that only mentions the first 3 system boards. So I think that using the DR commands, the domain reconfiguration, I should just be able to add the other boards to the domain. There were lots of errors on this one, and when the bus came up, you can see that it's in a 3.7, and it should be 3F, which means that parts of the bus aren't running, probably due to what appears to be failures coming off some of the bus A6 on the system board. So today it's deciding to be a bit pissy, but we will see if we can add the additional system boards in. I'm going to pull up the host view though. So this guy here is connected to the netcon. So this is the OBP. There, one of the address buses isn't running. So that's why we didn't get the full 3F there. But it does know that the rest of the boards are there. We have 12 working processors, so let's see if we can move these guys aside. Bring up DR. Right now it's the DR stuff is run from the SSP, but all of the actual work is done in the E10K's domain. And so it's busily connecting to all of the services on the control board, I believe, to work itself out. That's inconvenient. I just had an epiphany. The DR daemon will be running in Solaris on the running domain. I haven't booted Solaris yet, so I'm going to power up the disk boxes and then we will boot the system up. Stop this guy and we'll jump to our console. And whee! All right, so okay, it's on the network. That's convenient. Well, let's see. I have my doubts. Okay. So it is quite possible that the reconfiguration daemon isn't installed. Solaris knew this was an E10000 when it installed it, and it did install a bunch of E10000 packages, but it's quite possible that some of them, like the domain reconfiguration, was not one of them. So I might have to do a bit of dinking around. I'm going to shut the camera down for now so that you're not sitting me thrash idly, and we can come back to it shortly. Hey, so this is a couple days later, a good couple days later, and the shit's not fully up to temperature yet. I want to do more later today, but I wanted to put things together and get it out. This is where I am at, which is not at all a satisfying ending to this video, but that's my life and dealing with old computers. So the DR daemon, the dynamic reconfiguration daemon, is not installed on my variant of Solaris. I cannot find the package sunwldm, which I think is the right one. I can't find it. It's not on any of the install media that I have. It's probably specific to machines like this. Wonderful noise from my furnace. I don't have it. So I think the right way to deal with this problem is to simply go with my first plan, which was to destroy one of the domains, star 51 probably, since I've been using 50, that one worked best. I'll carry on doing the board shuffle around like I did to move the boards to 50, and have another try at this and hope that by destroying the domain and completely starting again from scratch, hopefully it'll come up at once and we can carry on there. I was hoping to get this finished a week ago, because it's more or less been a week since I started, but all of the holing the system boards off my little hutty house shed thing there with my left arm was a catastrophic mistake. I injured my shoulder about 10 years ago, and I really screwed it up by doing that again. And so I spent an awful lot of this week with a non-functioning left arm because I am a dumbass and I'm old and I forget that I'm old and a dumbass. So anyway, I will get this out to you very shortly, and then I shall hopefully later this afternoon carry on and maybe in a week's time get this put back together again and we can see what we get. Anyways, apologies for the crappy ending, but we shall overcome. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you next time.